All right. We are back into our series on sudden life. Are you excited? One of you is. That's great. I want you to start out by thinking about a time when you were awed. Do you know what it means to be awed? You were overwhelmed with the power of God when you saw some event of nature, weather. Maybe it was sometime you saw a blizzard, a snowstorm. Or maybe it was a time when there was a rainstorm and then lightning was happening, pouring down all around you. Here's my umbrella. Yeah, look at that. This is not what you should do if there's lightning, by the way. Stick this up as high as you can. So I'll tell you about one time like that for me. I was a teenager, and I was camping with my dad and my brother way out in the backwoods, kind of in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And we got into our tents at night. It was late at night. We'd stayed up around the campfire. And then, after we were just starting to go to sleep, it starts pouring rain like I've only seen a few times in my life. Torrential downpour. And my dad comes, and we're in different tents. He comes and he shakes my tent with me and my brother. He says, "Get out here." I'm like, "Are you crazy?" He says, "Rain like this doesn't just happen every day." So we get our gear on. We didn't have umbrellas. We had raincoats. And we get out in this torrential downpour, and we go out just past the campsite. You could see in the daytime, it seemed like for 100 miles. You could see mountain after mountain. Now it's nighttime, and we're looking over this valley and at a mountain on the other side, and it's pouring rain. And all of a sudden, the lightning starts. Boom! Lightning slamming into the side of this mountain. And every time lightning hit the side of the mountain, it lit a forest fire. And then the rain would put it out. You could see this happen. We probably saw it happen 6 times. And I thought to myself, I should be scared right now. I should be afraid, because if there's a forest fire, like we've driven into this place on dirt roads for probably 2 hours to get to the campsite that we were at. If there's a forest fire, we got to run. But somehow in that moment, with the pouring rain and the lightning strikes and the little fires, it felt like there was something behind all of that power. I didn't know God yet in my life. But I could sense that there was something more powerful than just the storm that was there, behind it, that was in control. And I felt perfectly calm. After a little while, the rain stopped, the lightning went away, and the moon came out. And then we saw what I have only seen once in my life, a full rainbow in the middle of the night. A full rainbow from the full moon in the middle of the night. And I didn't know at that time what I know now, that the rainbow is what? A sign of God's grace, His promise to human beings, that even though the storms will come, He's going to provide a way. He's going to keep us safe if we'll trust Him. Have you ever had a moment kind of like that? We're looking at the book of Mark. This is an exciting series. It's called Sudden Life because in the book of Mark, we talked about how Mark writes, boom, boom, boom. Things just happen in this book, one event after another. We took a little break from it the last 2 weeks. We did Thanksgiving and communion stuff. But if you remember, 3 weeks ago, we were in chapter 4, and we looked at the parable of the sower. So this is the parable where, somebody's going out, a farmer scattering seed, and it grows up in different areas, and some of it does well and some of it doesn't. We looked at several other parables, and that message was called Invisible Power. We need to remember a little bit about that message because today we're diving into the end of chapter 4 and chapter 5. The message today is called 3 Explosions. I'll tell you why in just a minute. So, in that last section that we looked at, invisible power, Jesus had been doing all these amazing things, and we talked about the reality of demons, the reality of spiritual evil. Some people had been saying Jesus had been doing such amazing things that some people were saying, well, he's either crazy or maybe he's possessed by a demon. He has some sort of evil spiritual power. And Jesus had argued that no. No one could do what I am doing by evil spiritual power, by the forces of Satan. In fact, in order to do what I'm doing, to heal people, to cleanse their inner lives of spiritual evil, demonic power, something more powerful than Satan must have arrived. He calls that thing, he calls it the kingdom of God. And he says, if I'm able to drive out these evil spiritual forces, then the kingdom of God is here right now. It's present. He's saying, in fact, that it was present in him. And then he goes on to describe what the power that can destroy Satan, the power that can bind Satan, tie him up and kick him out, the power that can defeat evil, what that power is like. And it's very surprising what that power is like. Satan's power, if you think about it, Satan's power is kind of like a nuclear bomb. It's the power of destruction. It's the power of death. It's in your face. It's huge. It's scary. The power that Jesus says is greater than Satan's power has a totally different character. We talked about last time, 3 weeks ago, how that power, Jesus describes it as a power that you have to wait on. It's a power that's quiet. It's a power that begins so small you don't even notice it. He describes it like a tiny seed. Most people don't pay attention to it at all, yet it is the greatest power of all. So it's an invisible, quiet power that requires faith, trust, and waiting on God. Now, you might think that doesn't sound like any kind of power at all. That sounds like nothing. That sounds like it could never defeat the scary, evil power that's in your face, the power of a bomb, the power of death, the power of all that which is obviously powerful and that I'm scared of in my life. So right after Jesus gives this teaching, he brings down the hammer. He brings down the hammer 3 times in a row. 3 explosions is what comes next in the book of Mark. And these 3 explosions of God's power demonstrate that even though the power Jesus is talking about is quiet, it requires waiting and faith and trust. You can't even compare its greatness with that kind of evil, in-your-face, scary power. The power of human beings, the power of Satan, it doesn't even compare. So we're going to look at these 3 stories today. The first one is Jesus in the storm. The second one is Jesus with the legion of demons. It's one of the weirdest stories in the whole gospel, the whole book of Mark. And the third one is a story where Jesus raises a little girl from the dead. He brings her back to life. Now remember, as we go into these, there are sort of 2 things going on. One is Jesus is trying to show us that the power that he's described, the power of the kingdom of God, is actually the greatest power. He's trying to show that to us. And number 2, these stories are also part of Jesus' first followers, his friends, his disciples, learning who he really is. You'll see that in one of the stories in particular, that in this section of the book of Mark, there's 2 secrets in the book of Mark. And in the first half of the book, the secret is, who is he? And Jesus is constantly trying, weird as it might sound, he's constantly trying to make sure people don't figure out who he is. He's trying to keep it a secret who he is. And we'll see him doing that twice in the stories today. So let's jump into the first one. All 3 of these stories are amazing. They are remarkable and full of power. The first one comes at the end of chapter 4. So he's just given these 3 teachings about what the power of God's kingdom is like. And then comes the story of the storm. And you can go ahead and put the picture of the storm up there. This is a painting by Rembrandt of this very scene. Jesus with his disciples, and he's asleep in the boat. So this is chapter 4 of Mark, starting at verse 35, if you want to follow along. This part, some of the verses are going to be on your notes. You have notes in your bulletin. And the rest of the verses you're going to have to look up on your own. They are not on the screen. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." That is the other side of the lake, the Sea of Galilee. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, that is a storm. And the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. The boat is about to sink. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up and rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This story is remarkable, and we have talked about it a number of times. This is one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible. Is it one of your favorites? Man, I love this one. We are trying to get at, in this series of messages, what did it feel like to be there? So jump in with me and try to imagine what it would have been like to be there. Jesus, as we've said a number of times, has such a different perspective than we do, doesn't he? We are constantly in this life, we're worried about all the stuff that we see. And Jesus is worried about all the stuff that we don't see. And he could care less about the stuff that we see and that we are afraid of most of the time. Here we have, they're in this boat, and they are about to die. All right? That seems like a reasonable thing for human beings to be scared of. That seems like a reasonable thing. But as we've looked at, Jesus says things that sound crazy to us. Like there's another place where he says, "Don't be afraid of people who can kill you." Wait a minute. Isn't that the main thing I should be afraid of? No, you should not be afraid of that because that's all they can do. Oh, that's all they can do. Yeah, exactly. So here we have Jesus and his disciples. The boat is in a storm. It's about to sink. They're going to drown. This is a very large lake, okay? This is not, you could just swim to shore. They are far from shore. If they go down, they're all going to die. And so they are reasonably very afraid of that. Jesus, however, is doing what? He is asleep on a cushion. He's got a little pillow. There's waves apparently hitting him. Somehow that doesn't matter to him. I want you, one of your tasks this week, as you look at this, if you look at this in your community group, as you think about it, if you answer those questions that are in your notes on your own outside of here, I want you to think about why is Jesus asleep at this point? And how in the world can he sleep? I think there's a number of answers here. Probably there is the fact that he is totally unafraid. This is something that doesn't concern him at all. The fact that this boat is about to sink. Number two, he must be very tired, I think, because this got to be loud, man. How many of you could sleep if everything was rocking, there's water hitting you, and there's a storm, right? There's probably lightning, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Could you sleep during that? I don't know. Jesus can, apparently. He's got this sort of total control over his body. He just, boom, he's out. Now, his disciples take him to be ignoring them. They know he's got powers. Okay? They've seen that already. They don't know yet how much power he has. But they go to wake him up, and they're mad at him. You see that in the text, what we read? They are not just saying, oh, Jesus, come help us, or why are you still asleep? They say, don't you care? Don't you care that we're about to die? Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever had a moment in your life when it seemed like you were about to die? Maybe not physically, but everything was coming at you. You were in the middle of the storm and you thought, why doesn't God fix this? Why doesn't he come and help me right now? Doesn't he care that I'm about to die? The answer is he loves you more than you can possibly imagine. But he's not primarily concerned with the thing you're afraid of. He's trying to make you more like himself. He's trying to bring you to deeper faith. That's his goal. He's working on a whole different plane than you are mostly thinking on. And that's what's happening here. So Jesus wakes up. Now, my wife is down at this women's weekend. And I've had my kids all weekend. Just me. Some of you are in the same boat as me. I am very good at doing all the tasks for my kids, okay? I can get them dressed, I'll feed them, maybe not quite as well as my wife does, but I'll feed them, they won't starve. I'll make sure, there's structure to their life. I'll make sure they got everything they need. But you know what's really hard for me is the part where they're constantly going, Dad, 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 Dad. Oh my goodness, I'm like this every time and then, can't you just leave me alone for 5 minutes? I'm trying to work on my sermon. How am I going to finish this thing? Okay, this is what's happening with Jesus here. Do you see it? It's almost like they're his kids, and he's on such a different level than these guys that he's hanging out with. He's trying to take a nap because they've been doing ministry. They've been healing people and teaching people like maybe 18, 20 hours a day. Sometimes they're not even taking time to eat. There's a storm going on, but he doesn't care. He knows that they're safe because he trusts God, his Father, absolutely. There's no question in his mind that they'll get through this storm with no problem. And he's trying to take a nap, and his disciples come and wake him up. Like, Dad, 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 come on, save us, help us. And Jesus, do you see it here? He gets annoyed. Jesus wakes up from his nap. He is a human being, as well as the fact that he is God. He is the Son of God. He wakes up from this nap and he's annoyed. Just like when my kids, or maybe you've had this experience, your kids wake you up from a nap. How do you feel at that moment? You probably get up and you go and control yourself and speak very gently and calmly to them. Or maybe you yell at them. Who does Jesus yell at here? He yells at his disciples. But who does he yell at first? Jesus gets up and he's annoyed with the wind and the waves. Almost like they're his children. Everybody else is terrified of them. He's annoyed that they're waking him up from his nap. Now imagine that you're there on this boat. You're scared out of your mind. This human being, this friend of yours named Jesus, who you hang out with all the time, wakes up from his nap annoyed, and he doesn't turn to you, he turns to the water that is crashing over the boat, and he says, knock it off, I'm trying to sleep. And the water listens to him. The waves and the wind themselves calm down, and everything goes quiet so that Jesus can go back to his nap. The water itself says, whoa, no, Dad is mad at me. His disciples, of course, don't know what to do with this. He then turns to his disciples and he says, why were you afraid? Okay, they were about to die. Why were you afraid? Don't you trust God at all? In the other stories here, we have the fact that the apostles, the disciples at this moment, they end up worshiping him. They don't know what else to do. This is a dramatic moment. In Mark, they turn to each other and they say this. I'm going to put it in different words. I'm sure they don't say this to Jesus because they're terrified of him at this point. They say to each other, who in the world are we dealing with right here? We thought that this guy was a prophet. We know he's got power. We know he's able to heal people. But this is a whole nother level. What has just happened in front of us Psalm 89 and verse 9, it says, when the Lord speaks, the wind and the waves become calm. That is, when God himself speaks, even the ocean and the wind will obey him. Psalm 89 was a song, just like we sing worship songs in here. It was a song that they sang as they went on their holidays, as they went to Jerusalem. This is something they sang all the time. They knew it from the time they were growing up. When the Lord speaks, when God himself speaks, the wind and the waves will obey. And here Jesus stands up and speaks to the wind and the waves, and they obey him. Who exactly are we dealing with? The first point for your notes this morning. Second point, God's power overwhelms the storm. I'll come back to the first point at the end. I always skip a point. God's power overwhelms the storm. So we were talking about the power of the kingdom of heaven. Remember what Jesus is trying to show us here. What Mark and Peter, through Mark, Peter, one of Jesus' best friends, was the source for this entire book that we're reading here. It was his sermons, his memories of what it was like to be with Jesus that Mark is writing down. What is trying to be communicated to us here is that power, the power of the kingdom of God, which requires trust, quiet, waiting. It's a power of growth and creation. Is it really more powerful than the storm, than the scary, in-your-face powers of this world? Here is a dramatic explosion of that power. It is so much more powerful than the storm. The storm is terrified of it. The storm is terrified of it. Let's jump into the next story. The next story gets even weirder, all right? So, the next story, starting at the beginning of chapter 5. I'm going to read, this first part is not in your notes, this on the back of your notes, but the second part that I'll read starting at verse 6 is in your notes. So here's what happens next. So they had been going across the lake, right? That's when this big storm happened in the lake. After the storm calms down, they finish going to the other side where Jesus wanted to go. Notice that it's where Jesus wants to go. He is leading, he's planned this out. He is trying to show them something. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, which is the name of the area where they went. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained, hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. This is a very disturbed person. Verse 6, so this is now on the back of your notes. When he saw Jesus from a distance, this very disturbed person, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. Now this is remarkable. We've got to do the work of imagining what it was like to be there, all right? So put yourself there. What you see is something like this. You see a scene with just Jesus himself that is not very unusual. It might be unusual for us to dress in robes, but that was normal then. So what you see is Jesus, who is not all that impressive in his appearance. Jesus looks like just a regular person. That's what he looks like. There was nothing particular about his appearance that would attract us or draw us to him. That's what it says in Isaiah 53. So he looks like just a normal person, and we have a few guys getting out of a boat on the side of a lake. Actually, there's a couple of boats because there's 12 guys. They're small boats. They couldn't all fit in one. So there's a few boats, and this was a normal occurrence. This is how you got around in those days. So imagine it's just like pulling up in a parking lot with a couple of cars and you're getting out of your cars. This is a normal scene. All of a sudden, somebody way off in the distance starts running at you. The man looks crazy. Now this picture has been sanitized a little bit because the man was naked. He did not wear any clothes. All right, so there is a naked man who has got scars all over his body, who is able to break chains. Did you notice that in the story? His strength is somehow superhuman. He has been able to break chains when people have tried to tie him up. Why did people try to tie him up? Probably because he did a lot of bad stuff. That's why we normally tie people up. Maybe just to keep him from harming himself, but probably also he was tended to harm other people as well. So this is a guy who looks crazy. In fact, most people would say he is crazy. He lives in a graveyard. He cuts himself. He screams a lot. He's totally naked, and he starts running full speed at Jesus. What are the disciples? If you're there right then, what are you thinking? What's your thought? Come on. There's not that as many of us today. We're a little bit lighter. Give me some feedback. What would you have thought? What would your response have been? Maybe you, if you're Peter, maybe you would have thought, I should draw the sword that's at my side. A couple of his disciples carried small swords, and maybe get in between this guy and Jesus, because this is not cool. Maybe some of them thought, let's get back in the boats. This was a bad idea to come to this side of the lake. Maybe some of the rest of them thought, that's weird, a naked guy sprinting at us. There's some thoughts. Now, what happens is, the naked guy sprinting at them, maybe they thought he was coming to attack Jesus. He is not coming to attack Jesus. He runs full speed at Jesus and then throws himself on the ground in front of Jesus and starts begging Jesus not to torture him. This is remarkable. Again, imagine it from the perspective of Jesus' disciples. We know what's going on in the story. We know Jesus is the Son of God, and this guy is full of demons. And the demons are actually the ones speaking, but the disciples don't know that at first. What they see is a naked guy falling down on the ground in front of Jesus saying, please don't torture me. Now this is odd because Jesus doesn't tend to torture people, does he? That's not really Jesus' MO or the way he operates, okay? Jesus was full of love. He's the one who's taking little children and hugging them and, and healing people and people that are outcasts. He's bringing them into the group. This guy says, please don't torture me. Jesus then speaks to this guy and says this, get out of him. Now, the disciples had seen this happen before. At this point, they're probably thinking, well, maybe there's a demon in this guy. But here's something that had never happened before. The demon didn't listen. Every other time that someone who was like that and had said crazy things to Jesus, and Jesus said, get out of him, the person screamed or fell over, something weird happened, and then they were fine. This time, the demon tries to negotiate with Jesus. Please, 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 I don't want to leave this guy. Please don't send me out of the area. And Jesus starts to talk with this demon as if they have met each other before. Do you see that? There is a backstory between Jesus and this demon. Jesus says to the demon, what is your name? Which one are you? I want to know which demon dares to not immediately leave a human being when I say get out. I want to know which one it is. And he says, my name is Legion. That's like saying my name is an army. My name is a horde. Because we're many demons inside this one human being. Now, at this point, you can see what is happening. This person has been possessed by all kinds of demons. These demons have strength, but they are also terrified of Jesus. I want you to think about this for a minute. Would you want to go up against a demon? Would you want to pit your strength against the strength of a demon? As I was preparing for this message and my kids were annoying me, oh man, those kids are annoying me sometimes. They kept coming in my room. I'm trying to prepare for the message. And so we looked up some pictures. We were looking up these pictures that are on the screen. And as we were looking up things about the demon that Jesus drove out, some pictures of different idols from different parts of the world popped up. And some of those idols, especially that certain religions worship, they look so much like demons, don't they? I mean, my kids said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, that's what some people think that's a god, and they worship it." And my kids said, "Why would anyone worship that? It's obviously a demon. Like, it's full of evil and darkness and has lots of arms, and you can just tell it doesn't want anything good for you. Why would anyone worship that? Because those things are real, and they have power. There's real spiritual evil in the world. Would you want to pit your strength against the strength of a demon? Here's the answer. No. That would be very foolish of you to pit your strength against a demon. Now, this man is full of, I don't know how many demons. Hordes of demons. A legion is somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers. I don't know if that means there were 3,000 demons in him, but we could just say there's a lot of demons in this guy. I want you to notice that this army of demons, Jesus looks like an ordinary person. The army of demons is terrified of him. Absolutely terrified. Sheer horror is what goes through the minds of this army of demons as they see the man getting out of this boat on the shore of the lake. In fact, they don't run away from him. They're so scared of him that they feel like my only hope is to run to him and beg him for mercy. That's how terrified the army of demons is. So what kind of power is the power of the kingdom of God? We don't see its incredible strength. It's almost unbelievable, unimaginable power. We don't see it because we're so focused on the things we can see with our eyes, we often can't see what's behind everything that's going on. But the demons can, and they are terrified for their lives of this man from Galilee who looks like an ordinary person. The rest of what happens, of course, is Jesus actually has mercy on the demons. That's very weird to us. The demons say other things to him. Like, they clearly know things that nobody else knows. Jesus knows it, and so do the demons. They say, "Please don't send us into the abyss." They say, "You're here before the appointed time. There's a time coming, but you're early. Why did you come early to torture us?" The apostles are going, the disciples are going, what in the world are they talking about? Jesus says, "All right, fine. I won't send you out of the area. You really want to stay here. Go into that herd of pigs. There's a huge herd of pigs over on the side of the hill." Now imagine you were there and you saw this. All you see is Jesus talking to this guy, and then suddenly the pigs start freaking out. The pigs start making all kinds of noise, and then the entire herd of pigs rushes into the lake and drowns themselves. At that point, everybody, the people who live in that region, Jesus' disciples, everybody except Jesus and the guy who's been saved from these demons just want to leave. What in the world has happened? This is scarier than we could really imagine. Who exactly are we dealing with here? His disciples say to each other. Who are we dealing with that when he talks to a demon, they know each other? That the demons are scared of him? But Jesus is trying to show them that the power he's been talking about is not only as powerful, is not only more powerful than the scary powers of this world or the scary forces of evil, it is so much more powerful that there is no comparison. The third point for your notes this morning is this: God's power overwhelms the forces of evil. It doesn't just drive them out, it overwhelms them. There is no fight. There's no battle. Have you ever seen that picture on Facebook of Jesus arm wrestling Satan? Did you ever see that one? Well, it came out maybe 4 years ago or so. It was actually set up by the Russians, of all things, to try and mess with the U.S. election. But Jesus arm wrestling Satan, and they're caught in this. That's not it. There's no wrestling match. There is no comparison. Jesus speaks. He simply shows up. Satan runs for his life. The third story. This is a great one too. Man. Jesus gets back. They get back in the boat because everybody wants Jesus to leave because they're so scared of him and because he just killed all their pigs and they don't understand that. If Jesus killed all your pigs, you wouldn't be too happy about it. Jesus goes back to the other side, and so now he's back. This was a Gentile region, a region of non-Jewish people where the demon guy happened. Now he goes back to the other side where it's Jewish people again. And there are crowds that come to follow him. Crowds come to touch him, to be healed by him, to hear him teaching. And in the middle of those crowds, this guy named Jairus, who's the leader of a synagogue. So he's kind of like a pastor or an elder. He comes to Jesus and he says, "My daughter is about to die. She's extremely sick. Will you please come urgently to my house and heal her?" And Jesus says, "Sure, I'll come." But he kind of walks slowly. Mostly because he's got thousands of people trying to touch him and trying to talk to him. And he wants to talk to all of them. Have you ever tried to talk to the pastor after church and you have to wait behind a whole bunch of people because there's a lot of people that want to talk to the pastor? Maybe it's something like that. Except way more because he's Jesus, right? And so in the middle of that, there's this really bizarre story. Jesus is walking through the crowd and everyone is touching him. And then all of a sudden he stops dead in his tracks and he says, "Who touched me?" And his disciples said, "Are you kidding me? Jesus, why do you always say weird things that we don't understand? There's 1,000 people trying to touch you, and you said, 'Who touched me?'" And he said, "I felt power go out of my body. I felt power flow through me. Someone touched me. Not just a regular touch. Someone touched me who had faith." And then this woman comes up, and she admits it after he won't leave. She admits it. She says, I thought if I just touched you, I would be healed. I've had internal bleeding for years and years, and now it's gone. Jesus says, "Your faith has healed you. Go in peace." His disciples are learning more about who he is, the incredible power that he possesses. Right at that moment, from the side, some runners come in from the Jairus' house, from the synagogue leader's house, and they say, "Your daughter's dead. It's too late. Jesus took too long." Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like in your life you were about to die in the storm and you were like, "God, just save me, just come. You got to come now. It's almost over." And boom, he didn't show up and you died. Okay, maybe you didn't die. But the bad thing that you were afraid of happened in your life. That's what happened. She died. Jairus gives up. He says, "She's dead. It's over now. She's dead. Why didn't you come faster?" Jesus says, "No. You don't understand anything. Just believe. Let's go to your house." They get to the house. They've already started the funeral procession. Maybe not the whole funeral procession, but they've got all the relatives there weeping and wailing in the courtyard of the house. They're mourning the dead daughter. They know she's dead. They've seen that she's dead. Jesus walks into a funeral. Imagine the boldness of this guy. He's so out of this world. Imagine you walk into a funeral, everybody's mourning. Instead of being sensitive and listening carefully to the people who are mourning and suffering, he says, "She's not dead. What are you weeping for? She's not dead. She's just asleep." They laugh at him. They make fun of him. He then kicks everybody out. Remember I said he's trying to keep the secret. He does that. Why does he do it? He does it just to throw them all off. just so that when he does what he's about to do, they won't be sure what really happened. He tells everyone the girl's just asleep. They know he's making it up. They laugh at him, make fun of him. He kicks everybody out. He brings Peter and James and John and the parents into a room with the girl. The girl is dead. She's on a small cot. Jesus bends over. We got that picture up there? She's dead in the room. He bends over and he just speaks softly to her. He says in her language, he says, "Little girl, wake up." And Peter and James and John watch as this little girl simply opens her eyes and comes back to life when Jesus talks to her. How are you feeling right at that moment if you were there? Peter, James, and John and the parents are astonished. They probably are questioning everything in their minds. Did what I saw really happen? Did someone really just come back to life from the dead? This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. To Jesus, Jesus isn't. How would you feel if you had just raised someone from the dead? You'd probably be pretty pumped on yourself, right? Man, God really thinks highly of me. I am amazing. I can bring people back to life from the dead. Jesus, this is normal to him. This doesn't trip him up for 1 second. He's not thinking how great he is. He's like, snap out of it. Stop. He says to everybody else in the room, snap out of it. Yo. Yeah, I brought her back to life. She's hungry. Get her some food. He's already on to the next thing. He walks out and walks straight through the crowd that had just made fun of him because she's dead, and the little girl walks out behind him. Everybody's going, what in the world just happened? Was she really dead? I don't know. He said she was asleep. Maybe he was right. We thought he wasn't, but now she's alive again. He's maintaining the secret. He's going to raise her from the dead because he wants his disciples, those who are closest to him, to know who he really is. But he doesn't want everybody to know yet. They're not ready. We'll talk more as we go through this series about why that is. The last point for your notes today, the fourth one, the power, God's power overwhelms death. God's power doesn't just make death a little bit better. It doesn't just make up for death. It doesn't just defeat death. It overwhelms death. Jesus brings this girl back to life from the dead, and that is run-of-the-mill normal to him. Where he comes from, that's just how things work. Because he can see from the beginning, he can see the end. He knows that one day all human beings will come back to life from the dead. He's going to bring them all back, and he knows it. He already sees death as not even really a thing. Death is not a thing, and neither are the little deaths that we experience in our life. Those times when you felt like God didn't come through for you and the really awful thing happened in your life, someday, if you trust God and keep following him, you invest in the power, the kind of power that's in his kingdom, his power in him. Someday, all those things that seem so awful in your life, you'll look back at them and see that they were really nothing. In fact, they were things that God ended up using to bring great things into your life and into the world, things that could never have been without them. And that's where we keep getting stuck. We keep getting stuck on, the storm is scary, I'm going to die. The person in my life is a demon. I can't stand them. I'm terrified by them. They're the worst thing ever. I died. My daughter died. The awful thing happened. Nothing can ever be fixed. But the truth is that God's kind of power can restore anything. Anything. Jesus is trying to drive that into us. The first point for your notes, which we skipped earlier, but is good to bring at the end, is this. Receive, trust, and wait. Those are the path to God's power. It might seem like praying, coming to church, seeking God, going to my community group, trying to go deep into the things that he's doing in my life, waiting on him patiently and expectantly for the things that I need in my life. It might seem like, from our perspective, those are weakness, but those are the pathway to a power that overwhelms all the powers of this world and every power of darkness. And that's the point. Let's pray.